Hey, it's your financial maven, Samantha Besnoff, CPA, and after almost 25 years in the accounting world, I've decided to share my insights and passion about money. Knowing your money and hopefully feeling less stress about your money is what I call being financially empowered. Welcome to the Your Financial Maven podcast. Welcome to the latest episode of Your Financial Maven. I am excited today. My guest, Roger Pearson, and I have some similar areas that we share. Roger is a master tax advisor and IRS Enrolled Agent. He had changed his job. He had been for 50 years working with small businesses, selling and managing them, and decided in 2001 he wanted to shift courses. So he, like I said, is a master tax advisor, IRS Enrolled Agent. You own and created Seagull Technologies, which is a company that helps small businesses. You help educate them, dedicating time to getting them to succeed in building their businesses through courses. I know you have some free courses that go all the way up to some paid college courses, as well as personalized consulting. So welcome, Roger. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, very excited. So I'll ask a few questions, and then we're going to get right into what the meat of the podcast is today. So what is money?
That is an interesting question.
Isn't it?
Well, people think of money and they think of what they can buy with it and so forth.
Right.
You need it to live on in this day and age because we don't really do bartering that much anymore.
Very true. But when it comes to small businesses, what is money for them?
When it comes to small business, money is how you judge your success.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I like that, especially for small businesses, entrepreneurs. I mean, making money, getting clients is a big thing for them.
Absolutely. You know, it may not be your overriding one, but you have to have a scorecard of something. And that's
very true.
That's like a universal scorecard of how well you're doing in your business.
It is. And as I was doing some research and learning about your company, Seagull Technologies, is helping businesses understand that. You know, as long as they're getting educated and empowered about business structure and finances and when is it a good time to hire somebody to help them with that, I think that they're able to go further if they understand that financial piece of the business. Wouldn't you agree?
That's absolutely true. The sad thing about this country and around the world, mostly probably, is that small business is the backbone of our economy. And a lot of people do not realize that. And without small business, we wouldn't have an economy. So knowing that fact, the educational system in this country ignores that fact. And therefore, there's no education on business and small business and all the things that lead up to it.
And if there is education, it is few and far between. I interviewed another guest who is also working with entrepreneurs, but it's not like the bread and butter of helping businesses when they get started, that kind of thing.
It's not. The nice, sexy things are marketing and social media, all this stuff. But you can have all that in the world if you want to. But if you don't know how to run a business, you're going to lose all that.
Very true.
It's going to go to waste.
Very true. And I think one of the things in starting a business or running a business is kind of knowing what kind of a business, you want. And I usually say about 5 business structures, but I guess you can kind of come up with ways you combine those. But how do you help businesses kind of determine, should they stay as a sole proprietor? Should they go into a partnership? How do you help them with what kind of structure a small business should get started with?
Basically, what I've done over the years the last 22 years in working with small business people now is I have to actually learn their business. Unfortunately, too many tax preparers don't take the time to do that.
I can agree on that.
Too many CPAs who also do taxes don't.
I'm not one of them, I promise.
And so I have to learn their business.
Yeah.
I know how painting companies, landscape companies, all kinds of different trades work. I knew how home chefs work. I even have a gentleman that sold energy contracts.
Oh, interesting.
Which was a really interesting client.
Yeah.
But you have to learn them to know how to advise them. And when to go from one to another depends on the business and what their plans are, what their developments are, what contracts they have coming up.
What liability they want to have, right?
Exactly.
It's
exactly.
huge.
And then there's different ways to take care of liability too. Whether it's a LLC, limited liability company, or whether it gets into the corporate structures. And I always advise people start out as a Schedule C.
Okay, which is a sole proprietor, self-employed individual.
Sole proprietor, just slap a Schedule C onto your 1040 and you're off to running. The unfortunate thing about the Schedule C is that it is the highest tax rates.
It is, because people don't realize it's not just taxing their business income if they have income for that year. There's self-employment tax involved, which is your FICA and your Medicare, because you are employer and employee. So yes, a lot of sole proprietors I run across do not understand that.
But if you have a good tax preparer, you can overcome things like that. I mean,
absolutely.
Let me give you an example. A couple of years ago, I had a lady come to me. She decided to start a business as a home chef. She must be a really good home chef, because the first year she made $100,000 profit.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And Schedule C, she was going to owe $6,000 in taxes. But
so she didn't pay estimated taxes, did she?
No, because she didn't know anything about that. And she didn't ever expect to be that successful. Well, someone like that, she came to me before March 15th of the following year. And I was able to use an exception to the rule. Now, the thing about taxes, for every tax, there's an exception to the tax rule.
Yeah.
And so I used it, and it got her reorganized into an S corporation. I actually saved her $8,000.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Being able to do that. But most people don't think that the first year, they start a little lawn care business or whatever. They have no idea, and they don't think. And that's fine. But if you find you're going to become successful, then by all means, find yourself a good tax preparer, learn and things.
I agree with you on that. I mean, you have to remember, and I'm sure you would agree with this too, when you're getting started out, you're so passionate about what you're providing, whether it's a service or a product, to others, that the financial side of it, the accounting, the tax side of it does fall by the wayside to a degree, because that's not important to you, because you may not understand it. You may not want to understand it. And you're like, oh, I'll deal with that later. But sometimes that causes businesses to owe more in taxes, or they're not seeing their potential because they might not make a lot of money in the first year because they've got to kind of work through it maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years kind of a thing.
Correct. Yeah. The thing that I get when talking to people online or various places I talk is that, well, I'll just hire somebody to take care of that for me. But that is not a good answer. Because how do you hire somebody to do it if you don't know what you're doing? If you don't know what they're doing? If you were a plumbing company and you went to hire a plumber, you'd sit down and interview that guy to know if he knew anything about plumber. And yet, these two positions of an accountant and a tax preparer is probably more important than that plumber you're going to hire, because they can either make you or break you. And they can cost you a lot of money, or they can save you a lot of money. So how do you know? Because you have to at least give yourself an elementary education in 3 areas. Those areas are the legal formations that your company is running under, how to organize your paperwork. I have so many people lose so much money because they didn't know how to organize their paperwork. It's, oh, I'll deal with that later. Or somebody says, well, my checking account register is my bookkeeping system. That's not a good thing.
It's good if they have a separate business bank account. We always say separate business bank account from personal, but that is not your accounting of your books.
And even that is not good. I mean, you could take business account and go to Walmart and buy a bunch of stuff. What's to say that was business related or not? And that is what an IRS auditor is going to ask.
Right.
I've gone through that discussion.
I was going to say, as an enrolled agent, master tax advisor, enrolled agent with the IRS, like you see those things, some to a level more than I do. I mean, my clients do get tax notices. They'll have questions, but I always, especially my small business clients, I always try to educate them, because it is financial empowerment when they understand, why am I doing the Schedule C for them? Why am I asking them to do estimated taxes? Why it's important to get that W-9 form for any non-employee compensation or vendor, especially if you pay them over $600. Why it's important to have the payroll in order. Do you owe sales tax? The whole sales tax nexus across different states. And I understand that it's hard to take the time if you're running your own business to do that. But that's why you should, like you said, interview the tax professional or the CPA or other financial professional and see, can they help you and educate you and talk with you, not above you. I think that's very important.
It's absolutely important. On a few of the podcasts I've done, I've had this discussion, and the person would tell me afterwards, I better go find another accountant. Because, if you have one of these people that, unless you work there for years, but even after that, and they tell you, well, just drop it off, I'll call you when it's done. Turn the other direction and run away, because that person could care less about you. You're just a number.
Yeah. I mean, it depends. You might have caught them on a bad day. You just never know. Tax season is busy and crazy. You might have caught them on a bad day. So it's really up to you as the person, the small business owner. You do have to ask those questions. And then you say, well, how do I know what questions to ask? Well, they say, oh, just drop it off and I'll let you know when it's ready. And then you could say to that person, I respect that, but I want to know. I want to know in the middle of the process where things stand. So you can't just leave it on the tax professional or the enrolled agent or whomever. You have to take some ownership of paying attention. Because I think as small business owners, it's so important for us to pay attention. I am a small business owner. I am an LLC, but still sole proprietor because it's me, myself, and I'm comfortable with that. And yes, I pay a lot in estimated taxes. I'm comfortable with that, but not everybody is. So don't be afraid to ask that questions, even if your tax professional doesn't seem like they want to talk to you. I think you'll find if you ask questions or, not bug them every day, but if you ask questions, they're more willing to help you out more so than not, depending on the time of day.
That's true. For most people, I think that's true. And the problem is that people haven't educated themselves so they know the questions to ask.
That's very true. This is very true. That's why I'm doing this podcast. That's why I'm having you on. We have to know what questions do we need to ask.
And this is what I've seen time after time. And people don't realize that the legal format you're at, the way you keep your paperwork depends on how much tax you're going to pay.
Very true.
Because those three things are totally interlocked. And a lot of people don't understand that. You can find all this information out. I mean, the internet is wonderful.
Yes.
But how do you tie it all together for it to make sense? And that's what you need to learn.
So what are some of the questions that you share with your clients on what to ask when they decide they want to hire or interview a professional to help them, a CPA, a tax preparer, an enrolled agent? What are the things you think that they need to really ask besides their credentials, right? We know that's a very important question because there are people out there called ghost tax preparers where you don't sign an engagement letter with them. They get really fishy about paying all in cash. They say, oh, you're getting large refunds when it just doesn't seem right, and they won't sign the return. So if somebody you hire will not sign the return, that is a ghost preparer. So what are the things that businesses should be asking when they're talking to a professional?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones is concerning continuing education classes. An enrolled agent has to take continuing education classes in taxes. I have to take about 25 hours a year just to maintain my certification. In fact, the enrolled agent is the only certification that requires you get it because of your tax knowledge.
True, but CPAs do have to get 80 hours, and of that, I think it's 20 is in tax. I think they change it. It's either 15 or 20 hours specifically in tax. So CPAs are required, yes.
Yeah, it used to be that they didn't have to at all.
It did.
And they have recently changed that. I'm not quite sure when.
So I have been a CPA for almost 25 years. So since I started, I would say the tax has gone up in how much they require every 2 years.
Yeah. And that's always an interesting question to ask a CPA when you're interviewing them is, how much of your CE hours are in tax-related subjects? If they hem and haw about that, then do you want them doing your taxes?
Right. And on that same notion, when I get a client who asks me a tax question that is a little more complex than the basic, like, oh, I'm an LLC and I work for myself and how do I file, type of return, I will say to them, okay, I think I have an understanding, but let me do the research. And because I go and do the research so that I can provide my clients with the most accurate tax position or information. And I think that's important to ask that along with the education is, do you, your research and the time it takes for that.
Right. And as you have a conversation with a CPA, that's going to come out.
Absolutely.
Whether they want to do that type of thing or whether they just, you get the sense, well, I just don't have the time to bother with that. And when you're talking to people, you can get that sense. And those things are really important.
So besides the education of the professional, the tax professional, CPA, what else should they be asking that financial professional?
Well, I always tell people that they should have at least 2 conversations with their tax professional a year, whoever's doing their tax. One should be in about February. To see if there's any little things that need to be tweaked for the previous years. And another one is in October and November, because every decision you make affects your taxes. It's the number one expense that a business has, which is what a lot of new people don't realize. And if you have a sitting with your tax professional in the October, November, then you can not only look back what you've done this year, if there's any changes you need to help your tax situation out for the year before you get to tax time. And there
Absolutely.
often are, especially when you get into the depreciations and the Section 179s and all those other things that you can use to reduce your tax liability. And so that's another thing that I always mention that people should really do.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, I always call myself not the typical accountant because I have always wanted to be at that level with my client to help them. And I'm not saying other accountants, CPAs don't, but that's just kind of my little, hey, I'm not your average accountant or your typical one. I take time with each client. So, that is something that I try to get through to my clients. I do newsletters, I do emails, I try to reach out to them. And I don't know if you find this, but I find this sometimes with businesses and with individuals that, they read it, but it's not tax time. They want to wait until it's tax time. And I always say that's too late.
It is too late.
It's too late. So how do you help your small business clients or those that want to start small businesses understand how important that is? Like you say, at a minimum, talk to your tax professional, accountant, financial person twice a year. But how do you get them to really understand how important that is? Are there things that you teach them, skill sets to help them understand that?
The biggest thing is to get them to understand the importance of educating themselves. But I try to do that, and I find that people probably understand it the best through storytelling.
Oh, yes. Yes. Very true.
Because if you give them an example of what you're talking about, it's going to stick in their head and they're going to try to take that example and apply it to themselves. If you just start talking tax laws to them, their eyes are going to glaze over,
right.
And they're probably not going to remember a word you said. So,
right. I mean, my eyes glaze over occasionally too, and I'm in the profession, right? I mean, it's tax law and understand the accounting for a business. It's not easy. That's why you hire someone to help you with that.
Exactly. And you should have that, maybe not the first year, but if it's a viable business and you want to go forward with it, this is definitely somebody that you want to have on your team.
And that's what I was going to ask you next is kind of that time frame of, you don't necessarily need that accountant or enrolled agent or tax person like right from the get-go and the start. But I agree, 6 months to a year, you need to start analyzing that to help you with your business.
That's absolutely true. Yeah. And if you do decide to pull in a tax professional, don't wait till April 15th to do it.
Very true.
Go in February.
Yes.
In February, because if you were successful that first year, then a good tax professional is going to be able to help shelter part of that income
Absolutely.
from taxes for you.
And not only that, but you say not during tax season, even October, November, December, if you think you have a decent understanding and you're doing really well, reach out, because when that tax professional is in the middle of tax season and it is March 15th to April 15th, they're not going to have the time to really give you what you need.
I understand that.
Yeah,
I do about 500 clients a tax season. And
I only do about 60. So, but
it keeps you busy.
It does.
Yeah, I work a lot of hours.
Yeah, it does. And again, we're not putting down those tax professionals or CPAs that do what they do and have their way of their philosophy. We're just trying to get small business owners to understand if they need something more, out of their professional to help them with this, you take the time, but don't do it really between, I would say March 15th and April 15th are going to be your toughest part.
Exactly.
But, it doesn't mean you can't send somebody an email and say, hey, I'm looking to bring on a tax professional. Just be prepared. That person might say, we can talk after April 15th.
It happens a lot.
It does.
And you have to expect that. You really have to expect that because it is insane during tax season.
It is. It is. But I think from not just the tax side, but the accounting side, I think having that education on your business structure, like you said, the forms and the paperwork in order. Get yourself, if you can, an accounting software that can help you. But you still have to educate yourself on that, because I know I bring on clients and their QuickBooks or their Xero is a mess because they don't understand. We were talking about just having that bank account as your bookkeeping. It won't fly because your credit card. So I use this as my example. These are one of my stories I tell my clients is when you use your credit card and you pay your credit card, you still have to record all those individual transactions as expenses because they have to go on the return somewhere. And the look I get from clients is, oh, well, isn't it just credit card expense? I'm like, no, you have to realize it. And then they're like, I have to put in each individual transaction. I'm like, that's where an accounting software can help you. That's where someone who does bookkeeping or a professional accountant, CPA, enrolled agent can help you understand and navigate that. But that's a prime example that I run across. What are some of the mistakes or big things that you see that, you go and you help small business owners to kind of say, okay, this happened. Let's move forward. Let's correct it. Let's remedy it. Like, what are the things that you're seeing?
I think one of the biggest things that people really lose out on starting out is people that drive for a living.
Okay.
Do not keep a proper mileage log.
I agree with you there.
And in an audit, if it's not a proper mileage log, that's one of the first things that the auditor will throw out the door. And it is probably one of the biggest deductions on your return.
I agree. I mean, I tell my clients, you can keep it electronically. They've got all these mile log, softwares. Yeah. You can do it in an Excel spreadsheet. You can write it in a book. Write it down as you're going. And I get that same thing of, well, wait, I have to track my business miles and my personal. I'm like, well, track your business miles and then take your mileage at the beginning of the year and the end of the year. Take that total, subtract out your business. Now you have both personal and business. But you need to keep a log because the IRS will tag you on that.
And I find that, I don't know if you found it or not, but I saw starting last year, a lot more IRS letters requesting a copy of the log.
Interesting. I have not seen them yet, but that doesn't mean they're not coming.
No, I mean, you hear all this news about, we're only going to go after the big boys. And they are going after them. They've collected billions of dollars from people they can afford.
But they're coming after small businesses too.
They are. They say they're not, but they are, because I've seen the IRS letters come in on these small businesses, these sole proprietorship, these S corps, and they're going after them too. I don't know whether it's just the computers are going after them or actual people looking at it.
Right. And remember, you'll get the notice first. They're not going to come knocking on your door the first time. There is going to be a notice, and it's not going to be texted to you. It's not going to be emailed to you. But it may, and I'm sure you see this too, you can now create your irs.gov, irs.gov account on their website to look at your business stuff.
Right,
so
correct.
Your notices could be there, but they're going to still be mailed to you.
They always mail. They do everything by mail.
They're not going to call you either.
No, there's a lot of scams out there about that.
Oh, yeah. That is another big thing. I just had a client of mine, a nonprofit client, get a letter, and it looked legit, but it was some form for reauthorizing their federal tax ID number, their federal EIN number. And I've worked with this client for a long time to know we're not updating anything with the EIN, and I've never seen anything like that. And they wanted $100 and some for you to fix your EIN. I said, it's scam. It's a scam, but it looked official. They
look real official. I see one here all the time. I'm in Florida. You have to pay $150 a year to have a corporation here. And people bring these letters to me saying, do I need to do anything with this? This person, for $250 will go out and renew my license to the state of, and I said, no, you just go out to SunBiz and pay your $150, done with it.
Yeah, my dad and mom live in Sarasota, and he has a corporation. And so I'm helping him figure all that. They just moved last year to Sarasota. So I'm like, all right, Dad, your business, we have to register it. And $150.
Yep.
Yeah, it's definitely, between federal and state. And I live in Pennsylvania, we have local. So you're dealing with federal, state, and local taxes.
Correct.
So small businesses need to understand that from an employer standpoint, if they hire people, from estimated tax standpoint, what kind of returns they have to file. Is that income considered earned income? Well, for local, it is, depending on the business structure. Again, how that all flows.
Correct.
We're not trying to scare small business owners. We're just trying to get them to understand how important it is to pay attention and know where to go. The IRS has a great section on their website for small businesses.
They've been building that out the last couple of years. There's a lot of good information there. But it's the type of information that if you don't have that background,
correct,
your eyes glaze over,
Right. You're right.
It's almost the IRS writes in their own language. I call it IRSese.
Yes.
And it takes a while to learn it sometimes.
It does. Even for those of us who have been doing this for a long time, it still takes us a long time to figure some things out. And, I always say to my clients, I can call the IRS and ask a general question. You can call the IRS. I know the phone lines might take a while, but 9 times out of 10, the agents are pretty good. They can direct you where you need to go. So don't be afraid to call the IRS and ask questions as well. Hey, it's time for a money break. Welcome back from our money break. So I have another question with regards to small business owners, especially for this year, what your take is or what you've seen with the beneficial ownership interest information reporting. It's called BOI, where small business owners have to report through FinCEN because of Corporate Transparency Act in 2021, file this form for beneficial ownership reporting. Have you run across that with your small businesses that you've talked to? Are they doing it? I mean, I'm encouraging all of my clients who are small business owners to go fill it out. I'm not working on it with them. I'm having them do it.
It's really not that difficult.
It isn't.
It's really not that difficult at all. I mean, if you're just a single owner or just two of you or something like that, it's very, very, very easy.
Yes.
But if you have a huge business with dozens and dozens and dozens of owners or whatever, like a big partnership, like a law firm or a medical firm that has lots of partners, then it's going to take a while. But they do allow you to download the forms, fill them out offline, and then just upload them. And you probably have an accountant at that point, which is you're going to ask to do that for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a liability issue right now with CPAs. I mean, a lot of professional liability insurance for CPAs is saying don't do it because of the penalties and the requirements. Because if you have a change in ownership, it's got to be done in 30 days. If you filled out the form initially and then 6 months later you have a change, you might not get a hold of your CPA or professional to do it within that 30 days. And then both the professional and you could get fined. So it's a lot to have to pay attention to. And is that something that you're adding in your courses or at least talking to your small business clients about?
Well, I talk to my clients about it. I haven't put it in my courses yet because it's brand new. It's brand new this year. So that's something I haven't put there. For the most part, I haven't had anybody that's really had any problem with it. It's not a complicated thing to do, and I don't deal with large corporations. I concentrate on small businesses. And so in that case, I've had a lot of people, they called, what is this letter I got? And then I explained it to them and just go out to the website, fill in information. And it may take you up to 10 minutes, you know?
Yeah, 10, 15 minutes. And I do the same thing. I just say, they just want to know that you're the owner, identify you as the owner, what your business name is, the address, and then really that's it. There's not a whole lot you have to do.
A lot of people don't understand why they did it. And so I have to explain to them, well, it's because of all of these partnerships for people to hide the money.
Well, the Corporate Transparency Act dealing with issues with falsifying information, with foreign transactions, with laundering of money, things like that. They're building a database. And I know that can scare people, but at the end of the day, you know, you want to know, one, you're protected, and two, that's the law. I mean, the law was passed in 2021, and unfortunately, we have to do this. And it's not from the IRS. I constantly am telling my clients, it is through FinCEN. So don't get mad at the IRS for this. You know, they're talking about it. They mention it too, but it's not an IRS thing, but there are hefty penalties. And we have to remind our clients that you have to fill that out by the end of this year. If you started your business prior to 2024, if you start in 2024, you have 90 days to file that. And any changes, you have 30 days. So I think it's boi.gov. You can look up beneficial ownership information reporting. Is there anything else with regards to small businesses that you think is important for them to understand or know when it comes to their business?
I think the biggest thing that new business people especially, I always tell people, and this is one of the things I teach, is that you need to have your system set up so well that any day of the year, you know exactly what your net profit is. And if you cannot tell that, you do not have your system set up right yet.
You're right. You know, okay, it's scary to read a profit and loss statement, but it really isn't if all the information is in there. And either you're doing the bookkeeping for it or you're hiring somebody to help you with the transactions and the work and teaching you how to understand those financials. I mean, that's something I'm sure you come across too. I always tell my clients, it's fine you hire a bookkeeper. You know, I do some transactional work for some of my clients, but a lot of times they have a bookkeeper and I'm kind of the one that comes in and does the reporting and helps them to make sure they understand it. But a lot of times I come across, well, my bookkeeper handles it. I don't need to understand it. Well, you do. You need to have that conversation with your bookkeeper because they're not always doing the transactions maybe the way you're thinking they should be done, or does it make sense to you? Because if you're looking at your numbers and you're going, why aren't I doing as well as I thought? You know, I've got all these clients and bringing in money, but how are the things being recorded? How is, you know, you're classifying things?
Exactly. You need to know that. And I think that's why one of the major reasons why there's so many small businesses that fail, because they do not how to keep up a proper P&L and know how to read it, and they look at it at least monthly.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important. And also the tax consequences. And that's why, like, I say at a minimum, I mean, yes, look at it monthly, but also quarterly. Before quarterly taxes are potentially due that you may owe, review your financials to see where you're at and do I have to pay anything into the federal government?
Estimated tax payments is a biggie.
Yeah, huge.
Yeah. And I've had so many people in the years, I had them what they're going to owe the government, and they freak out because they didn't know they had to send money.
Yeah. And I, like you said, that storytelling, right? Talking with your clients is storytelling. And I do tell a lot of my clients, listen, I'm in the same boat. I pay my estimated taxes. I'm not always happy about it, but I do it because I'm making money and I'm running a business. And I also don't want to pay any penalty, underestimated tax penalty at the end of the year. My husband and I, he jokes every year, I do the return and I show him my estimated taxes and I put it in the return. But we've also had other things why we owed. Capital gains tax. We sold some stock for stuff. I noticed this last year. I don't know if you noticed it, but about 90% of my clients didn't have enough being withheld. So if they're W-2 and they have a small business owner in the mix there, if they're married filing jointly, you have to pay attention to all that as well. How does having your own business affect your overall taxes? Whether you're single or you're filing jointly or head of household, that kind of stuff.
It does make a difference, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, they changed how the tax tables were calculated.
Yes.
I had a ton of people that got a shock that year. And then I had a lot of people. I mean, one of the major discussions I have with people every year is, okay, how do we restructure your W-4 and get the proper withholding out there? And what changes do we need to make so that next year when you see me, you're not going to have a balance due? And have that discussion every single year with a lot of people.
Because there's clients who have both W-2 income and small business income.
Oh, yes.
So your W-2 income or your withholding from that, unless you make your changes on your W-4, are not going to cover the taxes on any business that you have, any small business that you're doing in addition to that. So it's very important to pay attention to that kind of thing as well.
Yes. Absolutely.
This has been great, just chatting about small businesses. Is there anything else that as you do your courses or talking to your one-on-ones consulting that you find is so important for small businesses to be aware of?
Well, I think we cover most of the major things. I mean, I know a lot of people don't like to sit down and study, but the number one thing they could do for themselves if they really, really want to be successful is to do it. Just know at least the fundamentals so that when you sit down with your professionals, you can have an intelligent two-way conversation with them and you can interview them properly.
Yeah,
you can
very
find
true.
the one that's right for you and for your business. And that's going to be probably one of the top 10 major decisions you're going to make in your business. Who you hire for those roles. And you're putting yourself at a disadvantage if you don't at least learn the basics so you can have that conversation.
And for individuals like yourself and your business that help other small businesses, providing that education is important. And I think seeking that out for that, and I will be putting all your information in the podcast bio so people can check you out and find out from a business aspect how your courses and your knowledge can help them thrive as small business owners. Because I think it's important, and we touched on this a little bit about being both personal and business, but when you do have people starting out, how do you work with them to understand keeping things separate from personal and business? I run across it a lot where it's being commingled and it's not being tracked properly. And, I didn't realize I used my business card to pay for something personal. Like, how do you help your clients through that process to get them to know, don't use your business card for your personal spa day or whatever like that?
Well, you're always going to have people that will listen to you and people that won't listen to you.
Very true.
But it's basically, I just sit down and I have a conversation. Sometimes I get grief because I spend too much time with clients. That says, no, I give each client the time they deserve.
I agree with you on that.
That's the way I deal with it. And it's worked out pretty good so far.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's okay. It happens. Like sometimes it happens that you used your business card for something personal and maybe you shouldn't have. I think where it gets a little murky is if you're in like a partnership or an S corporation. It can get a little more murkier when your business and your personal kind of combine.
But basically in a lot of situations when I advise clients, you need to have a reimbursement plan, a formal reimbursement plan for your business so that if things like that do happen, then your business can reimburse you for that expense. It has to be a formal plan, though, for the IRS to accept it. It can't be just, I'll just, pay myself back.
Now, do you say that for your sole proprietors too? Just more of, best business practices? Or, sole proprietors, it's hard. It's just you. There's no structure like going into a partnership or an S corp.
Yeah, those conversations are mainly with partnerships and S corporations. They are because The sole proprietor, the IRS considers you and your personal and your business one and the same.
But I still think it's a good idea for the sole proprietor to really practice that mindset of this is my business, this is my personal, and having that ability that, oh, if I did use something for personal, tracking it through still an owner's draw account, like I still create an equity account for my sole proprietors. And I say, this is just owner's personal expenses. If you accidentally use the business card for something and now the personal is paying you back, like how you track all that. I still kind of use that philosophy of like a shareholder distribution or a partner draw, that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, I think that's an excellent thing to teach people to do, because at such time as their business grows to a larger where they like need to go to a partnership or an S corporation, they already have that mindset of this is how you handle these things. Plus the other thing is that it's really going to give you a more complete picture when you're looking at your profit and loss statements.
Absolutely agree with you on that. Yeah. Because you'll have a better idea that this really wasn't a real expense. This was really personal that I pulled out of money for. And then that makes it more profit, less expense. Or no, this truly was an expense to the business. I think people need to understand that, I run a lot across, when I have sole proprietors, they always go, well, how do I pay myself? How do I do W-2? And I'm like, well, you don't. You shouldn't, especially partnerships and sole proprietorships. You shouldn't be doing W-2 for yourself per se. But you're paying yourself, and that's where the estimated taxes come into play. As a sole proprietor, you can pull the money out of the business and use it for whatever you want to use it for. But remember, you still need to pay some kind of quote unquote payroll tax. And that's where the estimated taxes come into play. I think a lot of people with partnerships don't realize that money flows to them personally on their return. And that is also self-employment tax and should be paying estimated taxes. I think that's a very important point to make for partnerships as well. And, I always get that, well, I'm an LLC. And I'm sure you run into this, right? You have you say, okay, yes, you're an LLC, but how do you file your return? Do you run into that a lot, or are you a lot more now than when before LLCs became
a
like
lot.
structure?
There seems to be a large misunderstanding what LLC is. A lot of people think an LLC is a corporation.
Right.
And it's not. It's a limited liability company. And I have to explain to people that, prior to the LLCs, it took like 10 years for all the states. It's a state level thing. The federal government doesn't recognize it. It's a state level thing. It used to be before LLCs that sole proprietors and general partnerships could be sued and that your personal assets could be attached. So all the LLC does, it doesn't change anything book-wise, tax-wise, anything else. The only thing an LLC does is give you limited liability protection for your sole proprietor partnership, much like an S corporation would have. And it's important to have. And you'll also find, though, like in Florida, if you're in a trade, like general contractors and things, you have to be an S corporation. So there's those laws, too, that you have to keep track of.
Well, I guess there's no state income tax in Florida.
No.
But there is the business tax and registration for the state of Florida, correct?
Yeah, the only legal format that is actually taxed is a C corporation in the state of Florida. S corporations and partnerships, anything that flows down to the personal is not taxed at the state level. However, there are many counties that do tax that.
And that's an important point, that whenever you're starting a business, whichever state you're starting the business in, it's not just the federal that you have to be aware of. You have to be aware of what your state regulations are. And in some cases, local.
There's some states that are very expensive states when it comes to taxes.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't realize starting out that at a minimum, even if you have no state tax, at a minimum, 25% of your profit is probably going to go to the federal government between self-employment tax. And it's probably, if you're really successful, you're making a good amount of money, up to 40%. If you're in a state that taxes small businesses also, you could look up to 50% of your net profit going to
depends.
the...
Yeah, it depends.
It's incredible, but that's a big thing to take into consideration.
It is. And do you also do anything with your clients that you consult or in the educational courses about sales tax with small businesses and that area, which I think that's a whole nother level?
It's a whole subject into itself, sales tax, because they're different no matter where you live. They're all different, and the levels that you have there, the state sales tax, then you have the county sales tax, then you have a local sales tax, depending on where you live. And that's a subject into itself, really.
Do you at least provide some guidance with your clients on that, or say you need to go talk to the state and kind of find maybe that tax professional that deals with sales tax?
Yeah, I really defer that one because it's an entire knowledge set into itself. I handle more of the foundational aspects of running a business.
But it's still, that is part of that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Also, the other thing with small business is succession planning and life insurance and other things that are important to a business, not just the formation of it, but kind of as you work through it and then having a plan in place for, if you walk away or if something happens to you. Like, do you stress any of that? How would you talk to your clients about those kinds of things?
That subject really has never come up too much.
Oh, interesting.
It really doesn't. That's an interesting question. I mean, I've had some basic conversations over the last 2 decades on that, but I haven't got into real depth. I haven't had any clients that wanted to really get into depth on that.
I mean, I'm bad about not having really a succession plan of kind of what happens with my clients or my business. But my husband is IT, so I have all my passwords and I have all the computer technology stuff I share with him. Like, he has that. But I don't really have a way to trigger, something were to happen to me to let my clients know. Because I do yearly engagement letters when I work with my clients. So I'm not in a 3, 4, 5-year contract thing with my clients. But it's still, as a small business owner, you have to think of these things at some level.
At some level. And it's usually at a level become you're solidly profitable every year. At that point, that's when you have to really start thinking about that, whether it's it depends if it's in the family or not, or whether it's just,
Right.
That's just you yourself.
And that's where the professionals can help too.
Absolutely.
Roger, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for joining me. Your business is Seagull Technologies, and I will leave information about that in the podcast notes. Anything else you'd like to share about your business, about what you've seen over the years?
Well, I mean, if you want to go out to the website, I've got tons of educational stuff out there besides my courses. I have some free courses out there also. I have some free downloads. And if somebody has a question that they can't find answered, hit the contact and just send me an email. I'm not going to charge you $100 to talk to you. What I'll do is determine if I have the knowledge that you need, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for joining me, and I appreciate the time.
You're welcome.
Hey, it's Your Financial Maven, and I want to hear from you. Feel free to leave me your insights and money stories or questions that you may have about money. You can visit www.yourfinancialmavenpodcast.com and click on the I Want to Hear From You tab. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about money. The purpose of this podcast is to provide general information on the subjects discussed. It is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. You should consult your CPA, accountant, or tax professional for all of your specific financial needs or situations. Your Financial Maven is hosted and produced by Samantha M. Besnoff, CPA, and Your Financial Maven, LLC. Editing is done by Chris Zarnock of KM Zen Creative. Music is written, composed, and performed by Daniel Shore.